We've had the mass heater for 2 winters now. We're just coming up to our 3rd heating season with it. So this is our review, longer term review of living with the Rocket mass heater. The short version is, it's brilliant. I mean, I wish that we'd built it years before we did. It's the best thing I've ever built still. It's been a couple of minor issues with it, none of which is the fault of the heater itself, but we'll come to that. But would you agree?
Oh, definitely.
It's like
night and day.
There's before the mass heater and then there's after the mass heater. We used to dread winters. You'd be like 2 fleeces, hat, still cold. You know, you'd save it until a day when it was bitterly cold to run the fire. Now, the old fire we had was an really old-fashioned back boiler that ran on coal and wood. It never really got the house up to temperature at all. Bearing in mind that the house, when we bought it, was at the point of being derelict. So even though it had a certain amount of work done to it to bring it up to a certain standard so it was mortgageable, it's still a long-term project. You know, we're going to be probably at least 5 or 6 years still bringing, you know, the house up to the spec that we want. So we've got an old 1930s front door that has, you know, an old-fashioned keyhole. When the wind blows from the north, it blows through the keyhole and from around the door. It's got, you know, very poor weather stripping. It's, you know, it's contemporaneous with the house. It's a nice door, but, you know, it lets the draft in. We were never comfortable. Also, you know, the windows are a bit drafty and so on. You know, it's and it was cold all winter. You know, we could run the heating all day. We could have the fire in, burn loads of coal, loads of wood, and we were cold all the time. It was never comfortable.
Well, it never got above about 15.
And most people wouldn't regard 15C as comfortable.
Not really comfortable, no.
So the first day that we lit it, I've been joking for months, you know, when we were planning this thing, that by the time I got this thing running, we'll light it, and very quickly everyone will have to, you know, take loads of clothes off, and we'll all be, you know, sweating, and it'll be too warm. And we used to joke and we used to laugh about this. Imagine that, wouldn't that be hilarious? Never going to happen here. If it just makes us a bit more comfortable, that'll be fine. The first night we lit it, it didn't even have the bench fitted at that point. It was bare tubes, and the first night we lit it, it was what, half an hour?
Yeah.
And
it got up to 24 degrees, which is about 75 Fahrenheit, and I had to go and stand outside.
I didn't.
Couldn't cope.
I sat here and sweated and loved it. It was brilliant.
You did.
I mean, it was
like
just
a basking lizard.
Yeah, it was surreal. You know, I mean, just the difference between. I mean, it was an old heating. It's not an equivalent to having like a decent quality wood stove in your house at all. This is still more efficient than that is ever going to be. But one of them potentially could have got us up to temperature. But, you know, if I'm going to spend money on a heating system, it was going to be the most efficient I could get my hands on, and that is the mass heater.
And it's the long-lasting effect as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the thing. If you've got a normal, like a normal box wood stove, yeah, that'll get your house warm. But when you get up in the morning, it's stone cold still, because you've had, you know, this thing's cooled off, and, you know, it's, you know, the house is cooled off through the night. You get up in the morning, it's a rush to get it lit. This thing, you come out, I mean, you can put your hand on the stone, and it doesn't really feel warm to the touch. But if you stop, you know, in front of the mass heat, you can feel the heat coming off it down the one side of your body.
The house is still warm.
Yeah.
In the morning.
Yeah, and that's with the draft blowing through the house all night, you know, and it's still warm. By the time we finished this place, and we've got a little front porch on, and we've got, you know, the windows better sealed in, and a couple of other things as well, including a certain amount of passive solar being added over the next few years, hopefully. It's going to be amazing. I think we'll be running it for maybe 20 minutes a day, possibly. You know, it's just, it's so different. I can't stress enough the positive impact that this thing's had in our lives, in that we don't dread winter. I mean, we used to dread the winters. It was cold.
Yeah,
as soon
it's
as
more like endurance, really, wasn't it? You know, let's get through this.
Exactly. I mean, we weren't going in deliberately, but the point that our youngest was having swimming lessons, we'd be going to the leisure centre, and we'd literally sit there for like an hour or so afterwards reading, just to sort of, you know, bank up the heat a little bit, because we know we're going home to a cold house. When the camping pods were put in, you know, for the customers, if it was a nice day, we'd struggle to drag ourselves away from them to come down to the house, because the house was always colder because the pods were warmer just from a little bit of solar gain. You know, it's dramatic what a difference it makes.
Solar gain in a small space with body heat as well.
Yeah, you'd warm up fast. It phenomenal. Beforehand, right, if you needed a shower in winter, either you'd have to put an electric fan heater on, which, I mean, I wouldn't I'd be terrified to switch it on now with the price of power. But even then, you put it on just to take the chill off a little bit in the bathroom before you got stripped off to jump in the shower, and turning the shower off and stepping out into an environment that's just above freezing and toweling off quick. It was an endurance event. I mean, you'd have to really have a word with yourself in order. It was brutal. Now, no big deal. You're just comfortable. You're warm. Yeah, it just every single aspect of our life is so much better just from having this heat in winter. So yeah, overall, yeah, brilliant. I mean, wouldn't be without it now. I mean, to such a degree that we're talking about building rocket cores into just about everything, including the next one up will be an oven, probably in the kitchen there, just the other side of this chimney breast, and that again will have a rocket core because it's brilliant. We have another family member has joined. Was he just on the end there? Just about. We've got a cat. We adopted a cat last January. He was 12 years old, so he's got a bit of arthritis. He's what? Sorry.
Can't see him.
No, well, you just about see him on the edge of the camera, I think. But he was 12 years old when he came, so not a young cat. He's got a bit of arthritis, and he loves the winter because he comes and he just sits on the mast. This bit that I'm sitting, this is usually my seat because it's too hot for anyone else apart from the cat. We are,
you have to fight it.
Yeah, me and Snoop have to have sort of,
a little standoff about it
to work out who's going to sit here, and it usually ends up with me sitting here and him sitting on me. But that's okay.
Everyone wins.
Advantages of the mass heater. First off, it's just running costs. I mean, it was cheaper to put in. We wouldn't have put in a big expensive wood burner because we just didn't have the budget for that. This thing came in at under £1,000, even with having to build. I mean, it's all been built with all new components other than the second-hand drum, and it was a really nice quality oil drum, which is an odd thing to say about an oil drum, but still.
It had apple juice concentrate in it.
Yeah, so it was a nice, pretty drum. But anyway, all new components, including all the pipe was new and all the rest of it. And this is the design that we've gone with is with the flue that runs through the cob bench itself. There's a newer type that's come along now that people started using with a stratification chamber instead of the pipes, and that reduces the cost significantly. We went old school, literally by the book, apart from one component, but we'll come to that in a minute. So the cost was, very reasonable compared to, even a reasonable wood burner. I mean, I did a lot, all the labour myself. It was work, but I've got a heating system the likes of which you can't buy. It's brilliant. Other than that, it's come in at significantly cheaper than just a normal wood burner would have been. That again, I could have fit myself. It's insanely cheap, really, considering this is something that'll last for generations. I mean, the oil drum, that's for decades before that needs changing, and that's pretty much the only component that needs swapping out ever. It's absolutely brilliant. Occasionally a fire brick will need replacing, but again, we'll come to that in a bit. It's a really simple repair. So, in terms of cost, in terms of running it, we reckon we're spending less than a quarter on fuel than we were beforehand. But this is coming back to it again. I can't stress this enough. We're warm now. Beforehand, we were always paranoid about running the thing because this thing, consumed huge amounts of fuel, and it didn't really get the house warm. We could take the chill off a little bit, but we were still uncomfortable all winter.
And coal isn't great.
No, it's a fossil fuel. The logs that we're using now are mostly harvested local regeneratively from a
community forest.
Community forest scheme where all the old trees, as they're slowly blowing down in the wind, they harvest them, split them, and sell them for fuel, and then they plant a more mixed broadleaf woodland in its place. So it's really good. And then with a view to moving forward, of course, we've got I don't know how many thousands of coppice trees in, so we will be self-sufficient for fuel in time. It's every year we take all the willow that we've got as coppice and replant that, so next year we get 2 or 3 times the amount. If you start doubling and trebling every year, it doesn't take many years to get to the point that you've got more willow than you can use, but the first few years it's slow to get going. So we're a few years in, so it shouldn't be too long at this point before we're making a significant dent in the amount of wood that we're harvesting ourselves, but we're not there yet. But that is the long-term plan. It'll be effectively a carbon negative heating system. So whenever we heat the house, we're sequestering carbon. We are actually increasing the biomass of biological living carbon in the soil. It'll be there for generations. As long as we keep coppicing, it's virtually immortal. So that's a huge benefit for me. I mean, it's in terms of heating. Now everyone's moving towards heat pumps and so on. I'm going to do.
Can I just say as well, it doesn't require a lumberjack to process the wood.
That's true.
I can do it.
Yeah.
Mostly with loppers.
Yeah, the sort of willow we got, you can
small
do with loppers for a good few years. We've actually get to the point that it'll take a small electric saw to do it, but it's still really small stuff. You're not.
It's not a great big scary tree.
Yeah,
that I
you're not
wouldn't dream of.
Exactly, you're not felling
down.
trees. It's coppice. So it's at maximum, I think, the most we'll be dealing with is stuff as thick as my wrist. So you wouldn't want to take loppers through something, wood that thick. But a small saw, even a bow saw, even someone who's got limited ability physically could use a bow saw safely with a bit of practice, or a folding saw.
It's more like branch size, isn't it?
Yeah,
rather than trunk size.
because you're not cutting down cutting down trees, sectioning that down into rounds, and then splitting them. So you're taking a huge tree and reducing that to wood that's the right size. All it needs is cutting to length because it's the right thickness already to go into the feed tube. Which is why we've gone for mass heaters in terms of size are generally rated according to the cross-sectional area of the flue that runs through the bench and then out the chimney. Typically those are either 8 inches or 6 inches, and that's flue diameter. We went for a 6-inch flue diameter, and it's the same cross-sectional area as runs through the round flue pipe that runs through the bench. The same cross-sectional area is the feed tube, the square where we put all the feed in, all the fuel. So the cross-sectional area is the same, right through the whole bench and the flue and all the rest of it. The reason we've gone for the smaller one is because that runs better on stick fuels. If you've gone for an 8-inch system, it's better running on things like split logs and so on. But obviously we're moving towards a situation where we won't be buying fuel for very long. We'll be supplying our own with coppice stuff, so that's more suitable for us. But I mean, it will eventually be effectively free for us to heat our house, and in time, all the other technologies that we can have running on rockets as well.
We're harvesting the wind, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's really blowing today.
Yeah.
And it's strengthening.
This is a common rant of mine. I mean, people run their houses on solar and wind power. Well, both of those things that we think of, we're talking about, very high-tech solutions, a huge amount of embodied energy, especially in solar. It takes, someone running solar 10 years before you hit the trade-off in terms of energy, produced versus the energy it took to manufacture. It takes 10 years of use. It's running well. Whereas, biological, harvesting of, solar and wind biologically using coppice fuels is a whole different ballgame. You can take that down with an axe, you can take it down with a bow saw. You don't need any high technology for it, and it's stockpilable. If you're talking about stockpiling electricity, that's incredibly difficult, which is why we've got all these really toxic battery technologies that we're still relying on today. Big huge move across the lithium and all the rest of it. It's still a short-term dead-end technology. It's not going to be working in 400 years time. This will still be working in 400 years time. Fuel, the wind will still blow, the light will, the sunshine will still grow trees, and we can still harvest those, and we can stockpile that for years, decades, even if it's kept dry, and it's long-term storable fuel.
Yeah,
it's brilliant. Another positive of it is the fact that it's fuel independence and fuel security. So, to my mind anyway, it doesn't matter how efficient your heat pump is. I'll do a video on mass heater versus heat pump at some point in the future. I don't want to get sidetracked by that now. For me, it always comes down on the side of the mass heater, whichever way you look at it. Because it doesn't matter how efficient something is when you don't have any control over the cost or the supply of the energy to run that. So if you've got two vehicles running side by side and one does an extra 20 miles to the gallon compared to the other one, great, fantastic. It doesn't matter if the fuel can go up, 400-500% and you can't do a thing about it, which is currently the situation that we're in. I mean, most of Europe is still in, energy drought. We've still got that major problem. Coming into winter again, a lot of people are going to be really concerned. A lot of people are going to be hesitant to run their heating and stuff. It's not an issue that we're likely to have because the price of fuel wood is fairly stable. It has gone up in the last couple of years a little, but it still hasn't gone up anything compared to oil or electricity or so on. That's a whole other rant I'm not going to get sidetracked by, but Having fuel independence and fuel security, I think, is key. It's such a relief moving forward that we're not paranoid about, well, if the price of the electricity goes up, we got to turn the heating off for winter. It's not a problem. We're going to be warm.
Or power cuts.
Yeah, power cuts. That's the other thing, of course, is we are already pretty much, we got all sorts of bits and pieces like battery banks and things so we can keep the lights on. But heat is a big one. You can't run heat from a battery. It is a big power drain. Whereas you can run heat from something like this. There's no moving parts. It takes no power whatsoever. It just runs no matter what happens. Now, the only thing that this, as I say, was built exactly by the book. The only way that we've differed there is I've put a damper on the flue right up here. The book will tell you don't need a damper. In fact, don't use a damper because, virtually every authority on mass heaters will tell you don't do it because you'll forget to open it up and you'll have back smoking. If that did happen, it's right there. It's like, oh, it's back smoking. Turn it. It's good. It's three feet away. Yeah. But what we found is that on a day like today, you might even be able to hear a little bit of it. We're up to about 40 mile an hour winds outside today. Anything above 25 to 30 miles an hour, we find that we have to keep the damper at least partially shut. Today, because it's significantly above 40 most of the time, the damper is completely closed, and it's like an 80% closing of the flue. It doesn't shut it entirely. So on a day like this, we can really reduce the draw through the chimney because it's just so much that it would drastically affect the efficiency of the mass heater because it would be dragging the flue gases too quickly through the bench, and it wouldn't have the time to have that heat absorbed by the bench and give it for use later on. So yeah, I mean that is absolutely brilliant. I wouldn't build one without one here, but if you live in a place that hardly ever has high winds, it shouldn't be a problem. But for us, absolutely yes, I will always build a mass heater. So we've got several more of them designed for the site eventually. All of them will have a damper on. It's been a real saver for us. I'm very, very pleased with it. But conventionally, in a reasonably still place, you shouldn't need one. That is really windy. Right, so issues, because it hasn't been all good. So it's taken on a little bit of damage. I've got a tiny little one here, and I've got a slightly bigger one here.
To be fair,
in the
that's
plasterwork.
not the fault of the heater.
None of these things are the fault of the heater.
Us.
Yeah. Right, last winter, and this has caused two issues. Last winter, towards the end of winter, getting hold of dry season wood was impossible. People were selling it as dry season wood, and when it was getting delivered, even from people that are normally reliable for providing it, it just wasn't. There was too much moisture still there. You can get away with that with the normal wood burner usually, because it's running, the gas is going out good and hot, so you don't get a problem with creosote. But a mass heater requires really dry fuel. It's one of the few limiting factors of it. So we're in the process of building a much more significant wood store so that we will in time to be able to get a year ahead of ourselves. So we're always running on fuel that's a year old. So it's always bone dry, good to go, and it won't be a problem in future. But by the end of winter, because so many people were really concerned about running out of fuel, people were stockpiling it, people were buying loads more than they needed, and also more people have put in wood burners because they're paranoid about the price of fuel.
Travelling from further afield to come and get it.
That's true, yeah. There were people coming up to here, like from 100 miles south early in the year, loading up all the available dry fuel just so they're stockpiling. People were nervous. I'm hoping it won't be as bad this year, but we'll see. But anyway, towards the end of the season, we ended up having to buy fuel that was less than optimal. It had a bit more moisture in it than I'd like. So what we ended up doing was I had a few sections of fire brick on top of the drum here, and then I had loads of logs piled up. So we were, turning them every 4 or 5 hours of burning, because even after it's gone out, the drum continues to give off a load of heat. So what we're actually doing was we're drying tomorrow's firewood on top of the mass heater. That's not ideal. You're not going to get enough of it out to really make it safe to use. There's still a certain amount of moisture in it, and once or twice it got a bit too hot, a little bit of smouldering, so we were never leaving it alone. But on one occasion, it was a big log, fell off the top of the drum and bounced off the arm of the thing here, and it's left a little ding. But that's repairable. That's one of the good things about this, is when we were building it, I set aside little pucks of the plaster, which has all just been damaged, so that I could, if I wanted to, it'd be like, you know, an hour or so maybe, to, you know, just do a quick plaster repair on it, because that's all that's really been damaged. It's just, I've got a few other minor jobs to do in terms of plastering anyway coming up this winter, so I'll do it at the same time. It's really not a massive deal, but that is, you know, one issue that we've had is that ding. But you could even spin that as a positive. With any other heater, something like that drops, you got, you know, damage. You know, it's going to take either a part that you got to buy, or it'll take someone to come in to fix it, and that's going to have, you know, a huge amount of cost. This is just, you know, 10 minutes with a, you know, little trowel and I'm good. You know, it's really not a big job. So, you know, not too concerned about that, but it is something that happens. So we're going to, you know, that's going to be, you know, reflect in this video. Because we had to buy less than optimal fuel, with a little bit more moisture than optimal, we have had a certain amount of creosote inside the pipes. That is a problem with the rocket mass heater because it's difficult to get to it. You know, creosote of course causes a lot of chimney fires conventionally. It should never be a problem in a mass heater because all the creosote and all the soot is burnt off very efficiently in the riser, you know, as it's going through its burn. But because we were using slightly damp wood, which I knew using it was going to cause problems, but there was no avoiding it. It was either that or not run the heating, and it's just not an option. You know, it's a cold environment, we need heating, so I just did it anyway and thought I'll just face the consequences for that later. I did already have a plan in place for it. Now, I haven't actually serviced the heater this year, but I have been inside it and have a look, and yeah, there's a little bit of creosote inside the bench. I'm not overly concerned about that. When I built it with, it's got two main runs. So the first flue runs right down, does a complete 180 at the end, and then comes back up, you know, behind it. And most people tend to try and minimize the access caps for getting inside the bench to clean it. I didn't. I went for as many as I could get. So I've got two in the end. So I've got two straight runs. So with a set of rods, I could soak a rod in some sort of solvent, like, you know, alcohol, well, methylated spirit we'd use here. Yeah, whereas in the US it'd be probably like, you know, grain alcohol or something like that, or isopropyl alcohol, whichever you can get hold of that's cheapest. I'm going to soak a mop head in the alcohol, having strapped it at the end of rods, and I'm going to just basically completely wipe out both flues. It's not a problem as yet, and you know, it might never be an issue, but if it continues to build up, I've got a plan in mind for it. It's like a varnish on the pipes. It's not particularly sticky because it's had a lot of dry wood through it since, but it's just something, you know, to keep in mind for the future if it becomes an issue. Again, not a problem with the mass heater, user error, albeit done, you know, fully aware of the problem I was creating. A user error in that I was using wood that was damper than optimal. Not a flaw in the mass heater in any way. The flaw is mine. I knew what I was doing, but, you know, we had to do what we had to do. Another issue I've had is when I was building the core, I used ceramic fibre insulation over the riser and a little bit elsewhere, but the bit of insulation around the bottom of it, I used a lot of rock wool insulation. Same sort of stuff that we use in, you know, people use it in their attics and so on. You know, it's generic insulation, but it's really good insulation. So I used that, but because it's not as insulating as the ceramic fibre, I used quite a bit of it. That means that around the firebox itself, the bricks have got a certain amount of play, and they've shifted slightly. It's really not a huge deal. If I wanted to, I could even, in the course of, I don't know, a day maybe, hack out the front here, do the repair, and then over maybe another half a day, you know, putting it all back together, I could rebuild it all with better insulation if I needed to. It really wouldn't be a huge deal. But as it goes, I'm not worried about it. It's just something I keep an eye on. So those bricks have moved a tiny amount. Nothing I'm concerned about, but if I was building it again, I'd go for ceramic fibre insulation all the way around it with, you know, a wire basket around it, like, you know, most people build them. Again, builder error, not the design of the mass heater itself. So just, you know, being honest about issues that we've encountered. There's so much. I did this thing, it's perfect, it's amazing, you know, like Insta-Life all over the place. We don't do that, we explain it, including problems that we've had and mistakes that have been made. That is one of the mistakes that I have made. It's not the mass heater's fault, it's mine. And the other issue we had was, because the mass heater is such a simple design, it's got no moving parts, there's nothing to wear out. The only thing that can go wrong with it is back smoking, and if there's back smoking, there's clearly a problem. There's an obstruction in the pipes somehow. I managed to get this thing lit. It was reluctant to light. Now, most mass heaters require a certain amount of priming, so you'd get like a ball of paper, light it, throw it up the burn feed to get under the riser, especially when it's cold, and it heats up the riser, so that when you light the fire, it's drawing in the right direction. We've never had that problem here. It's always, even when it was cold, first time it was ever lit with, you know, damp cob and all the rest of it, it lit really easily first time. It's never needed priming. This particular day, no matter what I did, it just wouldn't quite run right. It was still running in the right direction, but I was getting a little back smoke occasionally, and it's like, okay, there's obviously a problem here. So as I say, I've got as much access points as I can get on this for servicing further down the line, because obviously I'm doing it all myself. So the top of this flue here has actually got a little access hatch. So I went into there with my little Allen wrench, had a looked in, and there was, well, it was like a jerky crow, you know, that had come down. It had basically done a really nice job of clearing the chimney on the way down as well, so there was a load of soot in there as well, and it completely blocked over. I couldn't see anything, you know, other than just, you know, crow feathers and soot. And it completely blocked the flue, and I still got this thing running. That's how much it draws. So I had to get a dead crow and a few flies and other unpleasantness out through that hole and away. Again, my problem, I haven't been up on the roof yet. I haven't fitted bird protection, a screen.
Cowl.
Yeah, a cover over the chimney to stop crows getting in. So a youngish crow decided it was going to, bless you, decided it was going to build a nest in the chimney, and of course that didn't go well for it. It's come down the chimney and it died. So that was, again, the only problems that we've experienced with it, and every single one of them is down to me, not down to the mass heater itself. It's been phenomenal.
Or me, because I was to blame for the log.
Ah, well, yeah, but that could have been either
Full
one of us.
disclosure.
Yeah.
No. It was precariously balanced.
Let's blame
and that
gravity.
was on me.
Let's blame gravity.
Oh, gravity. Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, overall, a resounding win. Oh, one other issue that we discovered is when we built this thing, we didn't have a cat, and Snoop really likes jumping onto the bricks and sitting on the burn tunnel. After it's gone out and it's all been closed off, the burn tunnel can get really hot for a while, and he really likes the heat, so he'll go and sit on it and he'll bask on it. But what we found is towards the tail end of last winter, he liked going and sitting on it. Hey, when it hadn't quite finished burning out, and there was, I mean, a very small gap between the bricks, and because of the way he liked sitting square on it, his tail would go down the burn feed. So yeah, it never caused any issues, but it's terrifying. I mean, yeah,
It's something to
nerve-wracking.
bear in mind and keep an eye on, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So what we're going to do is we'll just have a little mesh cover,
common sense.
like a spark arrestor almost, which is another useful thing to have anyway. You know, we're not too worried about, you know, the floor, for example, is all going to be replaced before we're done. So if a little ember bounces out with a pop or whatever, it's not a huge deal, but by the time we replace the floor, that would be a huge deal. You know, there'd be a rug there or something potentially. So we'll put a little spark arrestor on it anyway, so it'll still be comfortable for Snoop to sit on it, but his tail isn't going to go into the fire itself. Because, of course, you know, we didn't have him till he was 12. He didn't grow up around the mass heater. He doesn't know the risks of it. He doesn't know what's hot and what isn't. Cats are pretty good with heat, but still, you know, that was nerve-wracking. You know, that was... But again, that is down to our circumstances and adopting an older cat, not a fault of the mass heater itself. But again, it's something we've experienced with it, so it's in the video. That's pretty much it, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. I can bake on top of it.
Oh, it can do all sorts. I mean, that's another positive
Heat
with it.
water on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, we heat up washing up water because we're as a
Free washing
renovation
up water.
project, we don't have hot water running at the tap at the moment. We will eventually, once we've got a couple more, you know, systems in place. But you know, we don't have hot water on tap, so we boil the kettle to wash up. But we don't in winter. We got hot water from the top of the mass heater. We bake cakes on it, like you said.
Really good ones.
We get
That is
biochar
awesome.
from it. That's another yield from it.
Yeah.
In summer, it gives us cooling. It's a great thing. I mean, you lie on this in winter with just one blanket, and it's, you know, it's cold outside. On one blanket, you're totally warm because you heat it from beneath. The reverse happens in summer. If it's really stiflingly warm, the mass still remains fairly cool because it's the average temperature of, you know, the last several days or the last several nights specifically. It's hugely useful.
It is.
So, I mean, the only real byproduct from it is ash, and that's useful in the garden. We feed that to the potatoes. You know, they love it. So there's no waste from this. You know, there is no pollution. There's no waste. It's a beautiful system. Yeah, I can't imagine ever installing any other kind of wood burner.
They're great. You
It's
should
brilliant.
have one.
You should definitely build one. Right, that's our 2-year review of the mass heater. Maybe we'll do one again in a couple of years. But I don't anticipate much changing, to be honest. It's brilliant in absolutely every way, and it's the best thing I've ever built.